Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big time games where Oregon and Texas kind of just escaped a little bit this past weekend. Definitely wins that you're going to need at some point throughout the year, and they were able to get them at least avoid disaster and continue on their way to a possible CFP berth. But we got to get into a couple other teams that at least kept their hopes alive. I still think they have a little bit of work to do and need a little bit of help from different places throughout the next couple of weeks if they want to make a little bit of a run into the CFP, but they kept their hopes alive. At the very least, they kept their hopes alive. And we'll start with that big time game down there in Columbia, South Carolina. What a finish this was. This was absolutely crazy. South Carolina was able to steal a game after a just ridiculous play from Luther Burden down the sideline, who should be getting just force-fed the ball, and he's not quite getting that from Missouri. But at the end of the day, he made a huge play, but South Carolina came back down. They made a incredible drive down the stretch of that game. Under a minute, we were able to go all the way down the field. And Lenora Sellers, not enough can be said about this guy. He's become one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC throughout this season. He was remarkably efficient in this game and really has been for the last 4 or 5 weeks. Has been really, really good. And Dow Loggins with this offense has done an incredible job. I mean, it's been absolutely awesome to watch him after a hire that I thought was a little bit interesting, a little bit different than a lot of them out there. He was able to get it done. He's been absolutely incredible this year and seems to be a rising star in this industry. But Lenora Sellers, 21 for 30, 398 total, 5 touchdowns and 1 pick. That's about as good as you can possibly ask for, especially in that type of game. And then Missouri does deserve a little bit of respect here. I did pick against them against the spread. They're a very different team with Brady Cook on the field. I didn't expect him to be on the field, but at the end of the day, he wasn't perfect, but he made plenty of plays. And Nate Noel running the ball for 150. There were plenty there for the offense for Missouri in this game, where that's been kind of the disappointing unit throughout the year, where you felt like that was going to be one of the most explosive, one of the most dangerous offenses in the entire SEC. Hasn't quite been that throughout the year, and wasn't quite that in this game, but we're able to get a little bit of spark with Brady Cook being in there instead of Drew Pine. But the final 10 minutes of this game were insane. They were 4 touchdowns on 4 consecutive drives, and then the INT that finally ended it. But the final drive from South Carolina was a hot knife through butter. They absolutely rolled through that Missouri defense, and it was capped by a beautiful play call, and then Rocket Sanders just running through people for a touchdown and giving them the final lead that they did not get rid of. But this is a huge win for South Carolina. I've been pretty clear. I don't think they have a real shot at the CFP. I think there's way too many teams in front of them, and I think that could be added to if A&M were to beat Texas at the end of the year. But overall, they've done a remarkable job gaining steam towards the end of 2024. If they were to blow out Clemson and a number of other things were to drop their way, they'd probably be the first 3-loss team that would be considered. I don't think they're going to be considered, but it can't be overstated how much this could mean going into 2025. It's obviously not if you got one play back in that LSU game, you're probably right in the mix. But at the end of the day, still a lot of things going right for this program, and 2025 could be huge for them. But a great win for South Carolina. Fully clears Missouri out of the conversation for the CFP in the SEC, so feels like we're down to those 6 teams, where it's Texas, UGA, Ole Miss, Bama, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. Those feel like the teams that still have a shot, whether or not it's 4 or 5 or however many. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens the rest of the way. Where do they go from here? I think for South Carolina, there's so much to like about this team, especially as you head into 2025. You have a win. You likely have a win over Wofford, and then you have a huge one against Clemson. If you can get those 2 wins, you end the season 9-3, and you have an argument to be made that if one call goes differently, you'd be right in the CFP. So this is a great team. This is one of those teams that in 2025 I expect to be a really interesting pick to win the SEC, but as of right now, probably not going to be able to make a run into the CFP just because of a couple of different things that have happened throughout the year, but a really good team, and Shane Beamer deserves a ton of respect for what he's done around there. And then for Missouri, I think this one hurts. There's no doubt about that. You felt like you might have had that shot. You made that huge play down the stretch of that game, and felt like you might have gotten into the CFP. Felt like you might have kept those hopes alive, but then they come right back down, and they're able to kind of bury you. Still a program that has a lot of great things, but 2025 is becoming bigger and bigger for this Missouri team as they head forward under the Eli Drinkwitz era. But moving forward to the ACC, Clemson got a good win in a remarkable finish. Another game where it felt like Pitt might have won the game on a big-time score at the end of it, And then Cade Klubnik makes a huge play with his legs and puts Clemson right back up. And it really reminded me of that Trevor Lawrence play in the CFP a couple of years back at Clemson, because that boy was scooting. He was doing a little bit more than I thought he was capable of on that one. But huge shout out to Nate Yarnell in this one. He played far from perfect, but the run game really struggled. He was forced to throw the ball 54 times, and he gave him a really good shot to win. It was one of those games where a lot of different things kind of went wrong for Pitt throughout it, but Nate Yarnell just kept giving them shots to win it, especially at the very end. Gave him a really good shot to win it, and their defense just wasn't quite able to keep it up. But the magic of Pitt has come to an end. They were 7-0 a couple of weeks ago. Now they're 7-3, fully out of the conversation, and definitely hurts a little bit. I think it's a really good team and a program that could be heading forward into really promising things, especially with Eli Holstein under center. But at the end of the day, this is definitely a tough miss and one that they'd very much like to have back. But Cade Klubnik finished as the leading rusher for Clemson in this game, which is a huge amount of respect to the Pitt defense for bottling up Phil Maffa, because that is not an easy thing to do, but also Cade Klubnik for being able to take the initiative, say, I got to make a couple of plays with my legs, and he made the biggest one of the day, no doubt about that. But Antonio Williams has kind of become the pass guy for Clemson in this season. He's kind of become the receiver. Now, that's a more than fine thing. I think you can get to the ACC title. I think you can win that with him being the guy. I don't think you can win a playoff game if he's the only guy that's going to show up every week. And it's not to say that they don't have other talented guys. These freshmen are absolutely for real, and in 2025, they're going to be a problem. But as of right now, you need more guys. You need Jake Burningstool to get involved. You need a couple more guys in. As that wraps up your ACC play, you got a little bit of time to figure it out. You have a pretty much of a layup game this upcoming weekend, and then obviously South Carolina to finish. So still a lot of things to go, and they're going to have to hope that Miami loses one more game. If they win out, then they will be out of the ACC game and obviously out of the CFP. But overall, this win gives them a shot, and that's really all you can ask for right around now. But the fun for a Pitt has come to kind of a screeching halt, and you hate to see it. But if they're able to finish this season with back-to-back wins, I think you got to feel pretty good about what you got going into 2025. But for Clemson, it's just about handling business the rest of the way. It's not about anything special or doing anything different, just kind of handling what's in front of you. You lose to South Carolina, it won't really hurt you in the CFP race, because the only way you're getting in is in the ACC championship, and that obviously wouldn't hurt their ACC record. But at the end of the day, not one you want to lose by any means, and would put this season in a really, really weird spot. But if you do lose that game and you miss out on the ACC championship, then some questions are being asked over there in Clemson. I can't doubt that. But as for Pitt, in a matter of 3 games, they went from undefeated in the ACC championship and CFP race to 3 losses and totally out of everything. But at the end of the day, it definitely does hurt, but Eli Holstein feels like a guy that is going to be huge for them down the stretch. And it feels like a guy that, going into 2025, could be one of the more talked about quarterbacks in the entire country. I think this is a program that's heading in the right direction. They obviously are going to have a couple more hurdles with Miami playing good, SMU, obviously, Clemson. They're going to have plenty of people they're going to have to get past if they want to win these games. But at the end of the day, you got to feel pretty good if you're Pitt going into 2025, especially with that quarterback that you have in Eli Holstein. And then Arizona State got a huge one, the one that Desmond Howard was not aware of being a big deal, but it definitely was over there in the Big 12. And Arizona State's kind of been overshadowed by BYU and by Colorado, but they've been as impressive as just about anyone. Kenny Dillingham has done an incredible job with this team. They've been able to win games that they just really shouldn't have won early on in the season, and then they were able to really round into form, and now they're really a well-oiled machine. They didn't do what they usually do in this game, which is run the football really well. I mean, Cam Scadaboo had less than 3 yards per carry. It was not pretty, but Sam Levitt really picked up the slack. 275 and 3 scores through the air. It's the place that you can really attack this Kansas State defense in. They really did, and it was really Jordan Tyson that led the efforts. It was 12 catches, 176 yards, 2 scores for him. He was really impressive, and they needed him bad in this game, and he showed up. But then the Arizona State defense really played well in this game. They forced 3 turnovers on the day, had 4 tackles for loss. Wasn't necessarily perfect, but they swarmed pretty good. They were really all over the place and kept this rush offense in particular kind of under wraps for a lot of the game. And they did a great job against the pass as well. They were really, really incredible in this game and could be huge as they have BYU coming into town this upcoming weekend. Going to be a huge one in the Big 12, and we'll talk about it later in the week. But Kansas State kind of missed the mark this year, just overall. Really from the start, they hadn't played their best football. They just hadn't quite done what they wanted to do, and this officially puts a period on their season. There's still technically a chaos scenario where they find their way in. I don't think they're going to find their way in. I'll leave it at that for the time being. But for Arizona State, You got BYU and Tempe next week. It's the biggest game of your season. It's the biggest game of your program for the last number of years. And if you can get it, then you're right in the Big 12 title. I know that sounds crazy, but Arizona State is still very much alive, and this one does a ton for this program. And I think where they go from here is just handle your business. You beat BYU, you beat Arizona, you were in the Big 12 championship, and you're either playing Colorado or maybe you're playing BYU again, or maybe you're playing Iowa State. We will get into all the craziness throughout the week, but definitely a team that is playing really good football, maybe as well as just about anyone in the Big 12, and could be a really, really fun game in the Big 12 championship if it's them against Colorado. But for Kansas State, really tough season overall, just one that kind of got away from them early on. They never really were able to get it back. I think with Avery Johnson going into 2025, you feel pretty confident. It's not necessarily perfect by any means, but a 9-3 season at Kansas State is something to be proud of, and definitely gives you a little bit of rolling downhill as you head into 2025. Not necessarily the season that they wanted. They very badly wanted to win this thing. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, you get to 9-3, you get at least in the conversation at the top of the Big 12, and you head into 2025, maybe get a couple of guys from the portal, you add and make this look a little bit better. They do have Kansas at the end of the year, so this thing could get a little bit worse, but at the end of the day, it's still a program that I think is still really talented. Kleiman is absolutely incredible as the head coach, and I think they're going to be fine. It's obviously not a great year, and I think not having Colin Klein on that sideline was a big deal with that. But overall, it's a season that got away from you just a little bit. For Arizona State, for Clemson, for South Carolina, you can still look at the CFP. I don't think that South Carolina is going to get there. Arizona State would need to win this upcoming weekend and then beat Arizona. Obviously, Clemson would need to get a little bit of help from Miami. But at the end of the day, still a lot of really teams that are looking at the CFP saying, we need a couple of things to bounce our way, but it can still happen. So it's going to be incredible to watch that unfold throughout the rest of the year, and definitely a couple of teams there, including especially Arizona State, in my opinion, that are going to be really fun to watch down the stretch. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about the upsets. We got BYU going down as one of the undefeated teams. We had Florida's moment in the sun. Felt like a huge moment for that program, and I'll break it down at the end. And then we'll get into New Mexico as well as Stanford that got huge wins that clear up the CFP picture just a little bit. Well, we'll talk about it right after this.